First of all, I want to thank ISBA for giving me an opportunity to chair this wonderful session of very, very distinguished people. So a big hand to all the people who have assembled on the stage. And this is not a political clap, but a genuine clap to all of those people. Indeed, we are living in some of the most exciting times. And you have just had a very powerful speaker talk about the role of incubators and how an incubator plays such an important role in the growth of startups. We have been always talking about startups having valleys of death in their life cycle. And we need to see how to eliminate or bridge those valleys of death through the help of the incubators. But also incubators have valleys of death. And one of the biggest valleys of death is when the funding cycle stops from whichever is the grant-giving agency at the end of 3 years or 5 years. All the incubators face a very horrendous situation where they wonder, how am I going to keep this incubator going? And that's a big valley of death, because with that valley of death, all the supporting startups also fall in that valley. So it's very important for us to have a conference like ISBACON where we are deliberating on this particular aspect of how can incubators be successful, because an incubator is successful if the startups are successful, and the startups are successful if the incubator is successful. So there is a tremendous dependency on both incubators as well as startups together for us to be successful in the entire ecosystem. Now, the good news from my point of view is that we are one of the fastest growing startup ecosystems in the world. But to combine with that, we have one of the fastest growing economies of the world, because you need a fast growing economy to be able to support a growing startup ecosystem. And we're also living in a world where technology is making tremendous impact. Technology is changing the very face of the world that we all live in. It's changing the way you are experiencing the world on a daily basis. It's changing the way the world is experiencing you on a daily basis. And in this world of technology, of AI, of 3D printing, robotics, IoT, AR, VR, and so on and so forth, there is something that is coming to the fore. While we are the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, we are unfortunately not the third largest deep tech startup ecosystem in the world. We are sixth in the world, according to latest surveys and so on. So there is a gap between startups, the startup ecosystem that is happening, and deep tech startups that are coming up in India. And no other place in the world or no other country in the world has the opportunities as well as the challenges for deep tech startups. And so this particular session is, from my point of view, very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to the interaction with the three gentlemen on stage. I do think first, let's look at what is defined by a deep tech startup, and I'd like to start off with Praveen Roy-ji. How do you differentiate between deep tech startups and the normal startups, if at all there is a difference? Because that difference is blurring nowadays with all the advances of technology. But also, what is DST doing in order to foster innovation and deep tech startups and some of the initiatives that you are involved in?
Thank you, sir. As such, I'll just start. I'll just like to appreciate the vibrancy which has come in the auditorium now after the talk of Dr. Illa and after Mr. Ismail's introductions, and the sessions are at different pace and different benchmarking has been done. Hope the discussions also will be matching with the same standards. So when DST and other government departments started supporting startup ecosystem in the country, that time it was not very specific to what is to be developed. Whatever was coming, we were trying to support. We are trying to create the incubation centers in different academic setups and trying to support all the startups. We were getting a feedback from the incubation centers, from academic setups, like what is to be done, what kind of programs are required. And we were conceiving that kind of programs to support these startups so that whatever is their problems, the challenge that they face, government is there to support them either by the funding, mentoring, providing state-of-the-art infrastructure, labs. All these things were being built up for last couple of decades, maybe last 2 decades, this has been done. But after the launch of government's initiative of Startup India initiative, the things have changed drastically, the scale has changed now. And now we realize like what we are trying to develop is developing in some particular cities, like maybe the state capitals or maybe the metros, and we are now making clusters of incubators. So whatever was required to develop the ecosystem in the country has already been done. Now we have to change the focus in a directional way where the technologies that we want to develop are done by the startups. The challenges which are faced in society, we come with the specific solutions for that. And now with this focus in this year itself, we started consultations in deep tech domain, like what is required, how it can be done by the department, what infrastructure facilities will be required, what kind of financial support will be required. And for this, again, like as we latch on our incubator network, we went for a brainstorming session in January this year and try to bring all the stakeholders in this domain and understand like what is to be done, what can be done by the government system. And the inputs are very constructive, and based on that, we are in a position to conceive some of the programs. And to start with, what we have done is like, we thought like the centers are already there. We did a preliminary survey of how many deep tech startups are being supported by this network. And in 2 days of survey of incubators which have been supported by DST, it came like around 1,000 incubators, startups in deep tech are already being supported. Deep tech policy is already in place, which is under approval in the government. And that says like around 10,000 startups are being deep tech in the deep tech domain are already there in the country. So with these things, like the facilities are there to some extent. And what we need to do is like what kind of scale of funding is required for them. What is the gestation period? Like naturally, as you said, like what is a deep tech startup? So what is the understanding, like apart from the technology domains, like we always say like AI, ML, all these technology domains will fall in deep tech. But apart from that also, the deep tech startup will be more focused on IP. The entrepreneur, if they are having the IP, the business is conceived around the IP which is owned by the entrepreneur, that will fall in the real deep tech domain. And with that understanding in mind, we have to just see like how our research labs, how our academic setups where research is going on, whether this research can be made and given a trajectory where this can commercialize, this can come as a product or a solution to the market, and it can be commercialized. So with that objective, we are now trying to see like the research which is more on publication based as of now in the country, how it can be more applied research, how it can be more translational research. And with this objectives, we are already having some of the centers, like in 2019, we launched a mission which was called National Mission on Interdisciplinary Cyber Physical Systems. Right? With this mission, we are already having 25 hubs in different academic setups, which are having this objective, like the research can be made translational research, and with this outcome of the research, we can conceive some startups. And it is glad to note, like till now, almost 600 startups are being supported through this path.
Excellent.
So this was the initiative which was launched by DST in 2019. Now, seeing the recent developments in quantum in the global scenario, government has already launched National Quantum Mission, and this is also led by Department of Science and Technology. And with we realized, like naturally, as I said, like the research will be the key focus where the outputs have to be commercialized and the products have to be brought to the market. So naturally, gestation period will be higher. Funding will be more, patient funding will be required. And with that objective, the centers what we are planning now in quantum are having the funding is generous, very generous. Like the funding can go to 25 crores for the deep tech startups which are incubated in these hubs. We have already identified 4 hubs to be placed in across the country. And all the 4 domains in quantum computing, quantum communication, then sensing, and quantum materials. These 4 verticals have been identified, and these 4 hubs will be working on that and trying to see how the research in these domains can bring quantum-related startups in the market. So,
excellent.
Yeah, so this is the roadmap.
I think this was a very comprehensive answer, Praveenji. And it's very important for all the incubators to know that you have access to these capabilities through these initiatives, the cyber physical systems, as well as the centers of excellence that are being set up. And you are doing a lot to ensure that research that is happening in the research institutes is also getting translated into innovations. And that is where the startups can actually take that initiative and work together with these research institutes to create innovations that will be deep tech or that will create deep tech startups. You referred a very important point. In deep tech startups, there is a longer gestation period. And I think Dr. Ella also very profoundly expressed the need for us to think about how we are going to support startups in this. And so, Jitendra ji, you have been involved in one of the most important initiatives in the country with BIRAC and DBT. And we are also very proud that India was an exporter of vaccine, not just, they didn't import, they catered to the entire population. And we were one of the best managed countries in terms of the vaccine, not only the distribution, but also the implementation. But how is BIRAC and DBT addressing this long gestation period of a deep tech startup that you think we should be able to address, that everybody should know about, and what are the initiatives that BIRAC has taken to enable sustained development of a deep tech startup and a sustained support for them?
Okay, so deep tech startups, as Dr. Praveen Roy elucidated it very nicely, actually most of the R&D expenditure which is only 0.8% of GDP in India, is going to public research institutions. Private R&D is still missing. I mean, I won't say altogether it's not there, but still it's very, very less. So it means what? It means that if deep tech has to come, mostly, again I'm qualifying, mostly it should come from the public research institutions where deep money is actually public money is going. And 0.8% of GDP, let me say, is very, very less compared to the US or China, which is pumping around 3 to 4% of GDP, to the R&D. Having said that, even 0.8% of GDP, we have several laboratories, research institutions, etc., which are funded to undertake research. And when we talk about deep tech startup, it means that a lot of research has undergone into the concept, and now it has to be translated into entrepreneurial mechanism. So the startups that are from deep tech, mostly say biotech, for example, because I'm from that field, let me give some examples of deep tech, biotech startups, how we are actually trying to create those and how to sustain, as the question was put. So having said that, there is no mechanism as such to actually get these translated from the public research institutions to the startup or the industry. We are creating entrepreneurs in residence program, which is not a new concept. It has been there for a long time. But to put it to the government system itself is a huge challenge, as everybody might know, because of the bureaucracy, because of the policies, because of audit questions, etc. So, but still DBT has come out now, which is under approval, to create entrepreneurship in residence program. The concept is that entrepreneurs in residence would be recruited like research associates or postdoc, etc. And they will be working on technologies that are lying on shelf in different research labs along with the inventor, and then they will be incubated in the incubation centers that have been created over a period of time. Almost all the research institutions have incubation centers now, and then they will create a spin out a startup, and then the chain goes, and the BIRAC funding, etc., and STDB funding for seed fund, and then BIP CBRI, which is the next level of funding from BIRAC, and then even venture funding, which is ACE fund, which is created by BIRAC as alternate investment fund. We have 14 daughter funds, and these funds, they invest in the startup. So this is the full journey from ideation, deep tech, from the laboratories to the commercialization. We have covered almost all the aspects so far as far as DBT is concerned. However, what we see today is that most of these startups are stuck at the level of proof of concept, and they are not able to do pilot scale and commercial scale. The reason is, so far we have only done incubation center at a first level, but we have not been able to set up the GMP facilities, for example, clean rooms, pilot scale manufacturing, pilot scale fermenters, that we have not been able to set up in these institutions, in incubation centers. So next round of growth will come from that through Bio E3 policy, that we are trying to, it has been already launched, and BIREC is the implementation partner. We are trying to set up biofoundries and biomanufacturing hubs in the entire country. And I think when these incubation centers mostly are already set up, these biofoundries and bioinnovation hubs can be actually implanted on these. So superstructures of innovation can be built. Having said that, still this scale-up is not only the problem of the capacity. Then we don't have a scale-up fund, the early stage venture funding. So for that ACE fund, as I said, BIREC has set up a ACE fund of some 14 daughter funds, and we invest in the directly not to the startups but to the fund, and the fund in turn spends or invest in the startup, and then they exit at certain points, etc. But still it is only, the limit is 7 or 8 crores, I think, which may not be sufficient. Right now we are needing some 50 or 60 crore, 100 crore for a scale up, and maybe more than that. But early stage venture funding do not cater to these needs. I mean, they are more 500 crore, 1000 crore, etc. So creating these early stage venture funding, and one example is Kitwin fund that Karnataka state has set up, and many states are trying to set up. I'm not a keen supporter of government setting up these venture funds, but at least I think it can set up an example and try to bring people together. The other connotation of the scale up, which is very important for deep tech to come into the scale up or to sustain it, is the laboratory space. Most of the incubation centers are limited by space now. So if a team comes or startup comes with 2-3 people, to start with, and then they are grown, they are 25 people, there is no space. I was in Bangalore Bioinnovation Center. I have experience in this sector for quite some time. I know that the space becomes limited, the affordability becomes limited. As Dr. Krishna Allah was saying, we hate people here because we charge the startups, we take rentals. It's true actually. Startups, if we have to promote, whether it's deep tech or normal startup, we need to create ambience for them, and at least during the time when they're struggling, we should be able to support. So deep tech startups are very, very important for our country, because next level of innovation can happen through that. One example that biotech has is a CRISPR-Cas technology, which is not innovated in India, but say, I'm giving an example of how this deep tech changes the whole field. So gene editing, for example, CRISPR-Cas, generated from Jennifer Doudna's lab, she has now 18 startups, deep tech startups emanating from this technology, and she's having royalty, and it has implications in almost all gene editing field or genetic manipulation field now. And it is regulation is still very easy here because we are not inserting a foreign gene. So after recombinant technology, this is one of the another deep tech technology that has come up. We want such technologies to actually come from India. And I think there may be many leads lying inside these public research institutions. We are sitting at the campus of CCMB IICT, I'm sure. And we need to identify these. We need to create a mechanism through which this can be translated into entrepreneurial mechanism, commercialized. And I think DBT has created mechanisms at each step, or even if it's not put up, we are working very closely to set up those institutional mechanisms so that deep tech startups come to the fore. I'm sure that DST and NSTD are also doing the same. Deep tech startup policy has already been, I think it's going to be launched very soon.
Excellent. So I think big hand please. I think the important thing that I glean from what you're saying is there is a systematic linkage happening between what is happening in research areas in universities and how that is linked to an entrepreneur in residence type of program, which is seeing which of those could be applied. And then you're combining it with the startup ecosystem that has been set up in incubators and so on, so that they can move into a level of innovation and startup. And then you're looking at how you can scale it up further by setting up these biohubs as well as foundries and so on. Clearly, there has to be a path for larger amount of funding as the scope of the startups manifestation grows. And so you are putting all these linkages together, and that is what is going to be driving the deep tech startup ecosystem. Joginder ji, I'm particularly a big fan. I visited T-Works when it was being constructed, and I have not seen that. But I'm a particularly big fan of T-Works because we started this initiative in Atal Innovation Mission called Atal Tinkering Labs. And the Atal Tinkering Labs was exactly a very small, minuscule version of what you're doing in T-Works, and that is to get young students interested in tinkering with technology, with the hardware pieces, with the software pieces, with 3D printing, with robotics, with IoT, with miniaturized electronics, and so on and so forth. Can you share a little bit more about, I don't know how many of the people in this audience know about T-Works. So share a little bit about what T-Works does and how it is supporting hardware-based and hardware-focused startups. And then you can also share what T-Works is doing to promote deep tech startups and the sort of manufacturing, prototyping capabilities that you bring to bear and help deep tech startups in.
Thank you, everyone. First of all, it's my privilege to be here. It's a very distinguished panel and distinguished audience, and thanks to Ismail ji for that great introduction. So I would like to say that T-Works is known as India's largest prototyping center set up by the government of Telangana. And now I have taken some new initiatives after joining. One of which is that we are actually working to become a manufacturing knowledge partner, in the sense that, like Jitendra sir also has just mentioned now, that there is a gap which comes in between development of a technology and commercialization of the technology. So I have myself seen that there are a number of academic institutions and scientific institutions that are developing good technologies, but they are not out there. Whereas, if you look at abroad, you will find that a number of these institutions have their own lab to market programs, where the technology developed is actually taken to market, and there are a number of successful entrepreneurs who were actually academicians in the past. So what I am trying to do now is that we want to bridge this gap, and by encouraging people to get into manufacturing. So it is not only about hardware, but manufacturing could also mean even this is also a physical device. So any physical object which we can get into manufacturing is what we are looking at in supporting. So one of the ways we are trying to do that is bridging the gap for technology transfer. So we are already in discussions with various academic institutions and scientific institutions, where they are developing the technologies, or there are startups there which are already working on the technologies from quite some time. In fact, I have also visited a wet lab and for biotechnology, but that is of course not in our domain right now. But wherever else there is a possibility that people need some practical support in order to take it to the market, that is where we are coming in. Another aspect is, apart from the maker culture efforts, which is part of T-Works and which we continue to encourage, we are also expanding beyond our building right now. So the idea is that we should not only be in Hyderabad, we should also be, say, throughout Telangana, so that people don't have to travel from rural areas to Hyderabad all the time to come and work on prototyping. I have seen a number of rural innovators who have wonderful ideas, but they don't know how to take it forward. So they come to our facility and we support them. Instead, we can go there also. And while we are doing all this, one of the biggest things I've realized is that there are a number of people in the country who want to manufacture, but they don't know what to manufacture. So that is the thing which we are looking at. So if there are people who have technologies where we can help them to take it to market, so we can provide the market access for the scientific institution or the startup by helping them to collaborate with actual manufacturers who have the capabilities, who have the capacity, but they don't have the new products to develop. So that is one of the ways we're looking at. So,
and related to this, I just wanted to understand, we have, I don't know, several thousand ITIs in this country. So is there any collaboration between T-Works and ITIs? Because they also have training and skill development, and they have manufacturing facilities and so on. Would you think that a model which embraces other institutions within a state would help, a collaborative model would help in all of this?
Definitely, sir. In fact, I personally believe in collaborative innovation. So one of the initiatives which we have taken also is that T-Works should become a center of excellence for manufacturing ITIs, where in the sense that ITIs can send their selected students to us for training on the higher end machines which we have available, and then we can also link them to industry. For example, one of the initiatives I've taken was helping in the formation of the Hyderabad Electronics Manufacturer Association, which is started from T-Works. And the concept is that the people that they require will be trained in T-Works so that they get some on-ground training. So we are working with all institutions.
Excellent, excellent. So I think this is something that all of us should be aware of, at least in Telangana, where T-Works is having its base, but how we can also replicate this model in other parts of the country, because that is where it's going to have maximum impact. And incubators and startups can also leverage all of this, right? So I come back to you, Praveenji. You mentioned two things which I think is important. One, you said access to government research is important in deep tech startups and the translation of that research. And the second part is, which I wanted to address to everybody, what role you see public-private partnerships playing in all of this? Because you pointed out a very important point, and that is only 0.8% of our GDP is being spent towards research. And another interesting fact is that in all the other countries, advanced countries or developed countries, we have almost anywhere between 4% to 8% of their GDP spent on research, but more than 70% of the research funding comes from private institutions. In India, more than 70% comes from government institutions. And that's a big lacuna in terms of private-public partnership. So what is your view on how to strengthen that, and what are the initiatives or incentives that DST is doing towards that?
Yes, sir. Great question, sir. And actually, like for the research part, like DST is the key department in India, like for the extramural research funding, which goes to the different academic setups and the research centers and labs. And when we were brainstorming in January this year for the deep tech startup infrastructure which is required to be supported from DST, we realized like the infrastructure which is required for the research part is already many things has already been done. Like the capabilities in the research centers, the equipments required, the high-end instruments required for testing, measuring and generating reports. I mean, these are already there. Only the thing is that sharing should be very open to all who want to use it. The centers which have been created as Center of Excellence, we have portals like where these facilities are listed, like what kind of Sati center is there which is having high-end equipments, and startups are always allowed to use this facility, only they have to book the slots. And so these facilities, database is to be there where they can go and use, and pay and use facilities are already built. So we realized like no more much expenditures are required to create new facilities for the research part. That is already there, only we have to synergize that and make some policies and structures and roadmaps how it can be used in proper way. Research parks have also been created in different academic setups, as you said, like how public-private partnership will be useful. In these research parks, industries are already having their R&D labs in the academic setups. And then how the academic setups can contribute in their R&D, and how the R&D team of industry which is required by the market can govern the research by the faculty and the research students. That is being done through the research parks, and these are also created in most of the previous institute. It is there. So the research part is well taken. When we were brainstorming, we also realized like what we have to focus is the pipeline which is going to come. Like we need a quality pipeline of deep tech startups, like who are having their IPs which can be commercialized, which can have products or processes which can be brought in market. And for that we started putting our efforts, and we are now having one joint program with GDC, IIT Madras, this cohort-based program where we'll try to make the induction of this cohort will be with the researchers, and we'll try to handhold them and try to see like how the research can be dovetailed for a more applied part of it, and the translation part can happen. So we have started focusing on the creation of the pipeline of the deep tech startups, and these cohorts are already launched. This was also part of 100 days target of the government. And so this is one of the example of public-private partnership which is now going to see the day of light, because this is Gopalakrishnan Deshpande Foundation, and 50% of this funding of this program, 6 cohorts are going to be launched, and 50% is being paid by the GDC center and 50% is paid by DST. So we try to pitch in the initial phase, because we thought like the infrastructure which is already there, the support mechanisms through the Center of Excellence, research parks, incubation centers, hubs are already there to support the startups which are in this domain. but we have to focus on the quality pipeline so that in future, after 2 or 3 years, the research can be now converted to more usable products. And this GDC program will be more focused on the customer discovery part. So the researchers will be just asked to go and interact with the customers, their industry partners, what they are requiring, and then try to change the direction of the research if it is required, so that they meet the industry requirements and the standards. So this is, and this public-private partners DST has been doing in past also, like we have partnered with Lockheed Martin, Intel, and many of the corporates. And we had very exciting programs in maybe last couple of decades. Like this Lockheed Martin program went for around 12 years. And this was IDI scouting program, and then deep tech startups also, I mean IP-based startups also were churning out of these kind of programs. In almost a decade back, there was a fund also launched by DST in PPP mode, where IP-based startups were funded, and 6 startups, it was almost 10 years back, and 6 startups came out of it, and it was a partnership fund where 50% was given by DST, and 50% was given by NASCOM and IKP and ATEL and all. SIDBI was there. So this kind of pilot scale testing already has been done. Right, and with this kind of knowledge, we are confident, like in future also we can bring this partnership to give good results in this domain.
Excellent. Yeah, and then I think it's very important. Yesterday this question was asked in the audience, and I also shared a perspective that many universities, almost every university, focuses so much on placement, and so they work with many companies across the country to get them to come and hire their students, as employees. But there's very little effort being done to draw these same companies to innovation and entrepreneurship and research related activities of the university. And there needs to be a proactive reach out from the universities to be able to attract companies and tell them what is happening in our startup ecosystem and the importance of deep tech startups that can come out of the university research, and thereby increase the funding sources from the private sector.
Yeah, correct. So research parks are almost on the same track, and they are doing their job in this domain, because when these companies are there in the campuses, like they direct the research which is required by the.
So coming to you, Jitendra ji, biotech research is somewhat different in terms of the requirements. One is there is tremendous compliance requirements, and one of the gestation period is because you want to make sure that they comply. And especially if biotech startups want to address the global market, they need to be globally compliant. So what are the initiatives being taken by BIRAC to enable this global compliance requirement, as well as any global collaborations that help you in being able to address this particular challenge?
The regulatory compliance is one of the most important hurdle, an enabler also, but hurdle because sometimes it may become very, very cumbersome, and enabler because it's required for the sector to grow. Because if you suppose talk about genetic engineered crops, we know what the fate has been. I mean, it is under cold shell still. There may be some progress in genetic engineered mustard, which has been given some kind of field trials permission. But actually for food crops, we still have not been able to overcome that. So then how the startup will come here? Why the industry will play a role here? Because they know the field is regulatory, that Krishna Allah told, no, that if the regulatory hurdle is there, no investor, nothing will happen. So regulatory compliances has a huge role to play in innovation, and it is different for different sectors. I talked about genetic engineering, but same thing may apply to food for example, food sector. Similar maybe in the industrial sector or cell and gene therapy, cancer, and so many other fields. BIRAC is not a body to actually create, we are not regulators as such. Regulator is a CDSCO. But then we realize this problem, and as a stakeholder in this major stakeholder and enabler, we thought that what we can do So we have created a body within BIRAC, which is regulatory and public policy, public advocacy group, which caters to the need of this whole regulatory compliances and other things. So what we do here, mechanism is that we talk to the startup who is facing the problem. This is a first hub we do every month actually, and the startups, and we request or invite members from CDSU, the regulator, and to talk to each other, and especially we are also there to mediate and see where the regulatory challenges are there and how it can be solved. So this is one. Second is that to create awareness among startups and industries also, because sometimes these are unfounded also. It's not that all the regulatory challenges that keep on hearing is actually has some solid basis. Sometimes what happens is they are not aware of what are the regulatory pathways, and for that we need to educate them. So we create these sessions across India where regulatory challenges, etc., how to overcome that, and we call CDSU people also. I have observed that some of these startups are misguided by some consultants, etc., to milk money. They will say, no, this you do, blah blah, all these things, and it may not be required. So these are some of the issues I'm flagging because these are something that I am observing. The other thing that we are trying to do is to create policy papers or papers where regulatory pathways can be elucidated very nicely. For example, biosimilars. DBT has come up with biosimilars, guidelines, and along with CDSC, etc. So, functional foods, for example, cell and gene therapy. So, as the technology is emerging, new and new fields are emerging. It is very, very understandable that the present guidelines may not be able to cater to these fields. For example, AI. How do you actually handle this in the regulatory framework? So, what BIRAC is trying to do is we have subcategorized the whole field, life sciences area and biotechnology, and we have tried to set up a team to look into it and create a white paper, policy paper, and directly we are in touch with CDSU to give them all the inputs. And we also hold industry stakeholders meet very often. For example, while formulating this BioE3 policy, we had consulted 100 times, maybe more than that, the various groups, various cell and gene therapy, functional foods, industrial biotechnology, agricultural biotechnology, and all, and took the inputs from the industry also, because that is we have to take inputs from the industry to create this framework. And I think it's very, very successful program, and implementation has to happen definitely. And so those steps are being taken proactively. And what I invite, or what I request from the incubation managers and industry partners is to contact or always be in touch of the government also. Write mails. So, for example, people are very quick to say that government is not doing this, then, but when we actually send these policy papers for public review on websites, we get very few responses. That is so why people are not forthcoming and participating. It's not only criticizing, but you have to also participate and see, okay, these are the problems we are facing. Let us, do this and that and all that.
So I think you brought a very important point, and that is, can a forum like this, like ISBA, take leadership in ensuring that as an outcome of such conferences or during the course of a year, we are coming up with a very concrete set of policy recommendations on a collective basis, which is vertical. They can be, incubators, deep tech startups from a DST point of view, or from a BIRAC point of view, or even from a hardware point of view, and come up with, because this is the forum where you know what policy is inhibiting you from further progress. And therefore, an outcome of this should be a set of policies that is coming up every year so that we can continuously improve. And I know we are running short of time, so we'd love to have this conversation going. But one last question to you, Joginder. India is placing so much importance today on manufacturing, make in India. And there are many incentives like the PLI and so on and so forth, which is happening. What do you think? But startups, it's not enough for them to prototype and come up with a minimum viable product. the ability for them to scale their manufacturing is so very important. Are we geared up for it at all, number one? And what role industry has in addressing this challenge? If we can quickly address that, because I think many startups that I know, they get stuck up at that point where they're not able to scale their manufacturing.
Thank you. I'll just, there are 3 quick points for this. First of all, the government is doing enough for manufacturing, but many startups are not aware. There are a number of good MSME schemes which they are not aware also. You know, for example, there are subsidies available for women entrepreneurs. There are special zones where people can set up manufacturing plants. In fact, in some cases, there is even buying policies. For example, if you make something which is on the GEM portal, and it is actually you are import substituting some other component which is being imported right now, so you get preference. But many startups are not aware of this actually. So this is one of the things we are also trying to do now is educate startups about the manufacturing and MSME policies of the government. Then the second point is that startups need access to more funding. And for that, our VCs actually, which I also personally know, our VCs are more focused on scalable asset-light models. Unfortunately, for manufacturing, you cannot have a scalable asset-light model. So one of the things here is that we need to encourage more hardware-focused VCs to either be originating from India or come from abroad. So that is also one of the things we are looking at. And the third point, of course, is that startups need to tie up with industries. You know, bigger industries should play the role of a big brother or a big sister, so that they can encourage and incubate startups from within them to do more manufacturing. And this can also be done very well by PSUs actually, because PSUs have the funds for this, and they also have the ability to sustain startups for a longer period of time. So, thank you.
Great. So I do also want to recommend to ISBA, based upon this conversation we have had, that you should have quite a few industry leaders attending this conference and listening to the issues that are there and how they can support. Because without that support and without that collaboration and integration, it's going to be very difficult for a startup ecosystem to really make impact. So I just want to end on this note. The importance of deep tech startups and the need for deep tech startups is very high, because as Dr. Ella said, there is innovation only when there is demand. And when we are a country of 1 billion people, and I often say this, with 1 million challenges. But the 1 million challenges are 1 million opportunities for us to have deep tech startups address some of those challenges, and the other startups address the others. And that is the opportunity. And I just want you to give one word of advice or last suggestion to all the incubators, if you would like to share something on an encouraging note.
So, already all are very motivated, and you have seen the impact that they have created. So, I mean, the future is collaboration, as already said, and the PPP is the thing which is going to survive, and that is to be brought. I mean, I have seen Mr. Mittal, like any proposal which was coming in PPP mode, before listening to the proposal, he was saying it is okay, we are there. So this is the domain, like what we have to do now. Because, see, 50% when private is taking that risk and they are coming, so government thinks like that due diligence part, the execution part, the quality, the professional standards will be met. And in that case, the approval process, internal process are very fast. So next future roadmap should be totally focused on PPP, and also like national research of NRF, like research foundation has already been launched and on the way. So 70% investment is expected to come from industry and private partners for the research in the country.
On encouraging note, definitely government's PLI scheme is very, very important to actually, spur manufacturing in India and lower down the cost of manufacturing. I think in addition, I think electricity cost and logistics cost has to also be taken care of so that we can beat China. Electricity cost has long history. I mean, we are part of non-proliferation treaty, etc. You cannot get electricity from the nuclear power. There's so many things which cannot be discussed at this forum, but all I'm trying to say is that alternate energy and Gati Shakti Yojana that government has put up. So these two things are very, very powerful to actually take our country to the next step. Second is the public participation. BIRAC has a very good experience in attracting the private money. For example, BIPP and SIBRI, that schemes many of you might be knowing, mandates private or applicant also to put money. So 50% we put 5 crores, you put 5 crores, so 10 crores. So that has not been quantified. That has increased the private participation of R&D. And triple helix model, which Dr. Praveen has already talked about, is research parks where we are building the cold shells, etc., or incubation centers, and a private startup is coming, and actually they are doing internal fittings, and also they are also spending money and they are paying rent. So definitely it's also maybe the part of that whole public participation. So I think these are important points.
Yeah, thank you. So I would once again thanking the distinguished audience and the panelists for this opportunity to be here. And I would just like to say that at TWorks we don't want to work in isolation. So there are a number of amazing incubators here, and some of you have visited TWorks yesterday. So I would be very glad if you could please keep me in mind and please keep TWorks in mind and reach out to us so that we can work together on enabling the startup revolution in India to take forward more. Thank you.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to My Startup TV.